I'm just looking at the chat now. Don't see anything in there unless I'm missing something, Abel. Or maybe somebody might have messaged directly.
No. I asked a question to Leo, but it was like a direct message, but it's related to just the if there is any Leo if and Ryan, if you have like a current white paper listing the capabilities and interoperability of BLDX, I would be very
Any
interested.
specific aspect you're more interested in? We
Uh,
do not have an overall white paper.
right, yeah. Maybe a list of capabilities that you have at the moment and a roadmap to develop new capabilities in the next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think we talked to the kind of the 5 areas
yeah,
a little bit, but those uh, are but the message queue, the knowledge graph, and combined with the decentralized backend, I think are probably the three.
right.
Um, there's a lot of the kind of real time flow that we could probably get into, but yeah, we'll like I said, we're going to open source the message queue, so we can share that with everybody here when that happens. But it's in production now and it's looking good, so it should be very soon.
Great. Okay. I don't see questions in the chat, but Niall, I think you had some questions, no?
Yeah, well, I mentioned about the open source message queue. I think it'd be nice to see that. One thing we used to talk quite a lot about over the last few years was ontologies. I don't see much discussion around that now, but if we're talking about knowledge graphs, which is an area of interest of mine as well, if we're all talking about these things, do we think that there is a universal way to specify what these things are and how they all relate to each other? That might be something standards based that we could then link rather than these silos of knowledge graphs that don't interact with anything else. Just wondering if you guys who are looking at this specifically for construction have come across anything and it wasn't relevant, or do you think you could collaborate on building something that is a useful starting point?
I certainly think that's something we should discuss. And the CBC is developing our ontology, but we should team up with.
Yeah, we talked about that. I remember a couple of years ago, Abel, specifically when we were working with the HT wallets and building our data structures into those, looking at what would be most useful. With the knowledge graphs, it is a little more there. When you're taking all this unstructured data, it is unstructured, and so it's pulling what structure it can out of it. It'll be interesting to compare the structures that these knowledge graphs find compared to the kind of established ontologies that are out there.
Yeah, I think an ontology is only as good as an implementation. If you're doing with real world usage, does this actually map to anything that's important? Or it's always a chicken and egg. You need something to start from, but something that has to be real enough to be useful as well, from my experience on this. So I think road testing these things is
Yeah.
would be useful. But it sounds like at least if there's some communication there, able might be good to put heads together. Unless obviously there's commercial constraints, maybe that is IP. But I think
Yeah.
we can all benefit, I think, from having some shared view of the world in this area.
Yes, yeah, I think so. So we started to develop the DICO ontology, the distributed architecture, engineering, construction, and operations ontology. So we do have a draft model, but this has been slow mainly because of myself being submerged in this mega project I'm dealing with at the moment. I was collaborating with a professor at Newcastle, Northumbria University, sorry, and one from Newcastle University as well. But we need to kind of pick this up and run again. I've been thinking that, so I've been playing a little bit with Firebase, and it's all this vibe coding is incredibly powerful when you start to use it with our ontology. And I think that is something that I want to pursue next year. So I probably will organize workshops at UCL and call computer science students and Bartlett students to come over and try, and people from the industry to work on the development of code, but at the same time work on the development of the ontology to assist the AI generation of that code. So that's something I've been thinking about. But if there are people interested in the call to work on the ontology, please voice yourselves and connect with me, because we do have a draft model. So in that model, we have pretty much everything that there is to be known about BIM, like all the terms within BIM, and most of the terms are about distributed systems. But we need to model other things like capabilities, application functionalities, business functionalities, if we're thinking about an enterprise layering of the model of that ontology. Yeah, so that's where we are at the moment, and I'm very happy to start to organize this again. Yeah, and I think I was going to ask if you do anything related to that, anyone in the call, if any of you are doing spec vibe coding, because I think it's a very interesting topic, and there is a lot to be developed there. It's very quiet.
Yeah, no, I was waiting for those who are working closer on the knowledge graphs to answer that one. I guess following on from that, there's a lot of talk of tokenization down to very small levels. I seem to remember a talk, was it last year, by a startup that were going down to the bolt level or the nail level in a house. And I think that's quite ambitious, but if we're looking at ontologies, I think they need to go right down to, in this case, as Theo was saying, the material level for the 3D printed walls. It's where to start, and link all this together is interesting.
Yes, yeah, and for the DICO ontology, something we do have is an embedded IFC schema. So
all right.
the DICO ontology has the entire IFC schema, and then we adding the different semantics in respect to distributed systems, to application functions, etc. So we just imported the OWL IFC into the DICO ontologies in a separate folder and start to create the different semantic relationships with everything else we're creating. So, and I think that would be, and the IFC goes down to, the screws within the doorknob. It describes everything. And I've been approaching this from the BFO perspective. The basic foundation ontology, yeah.
The question I would have, Abel, is how much of that does it need to be in that kind of umbrella ontology, and how much could it be? I mean, what is always confusing for me in terms of ontology is that at least that might come out of the way of research, right? Every researcher creates their own ontology when they want to solve a problem, right? And we end up with
that's okay. Yeah, that's
yeah,
okay. If it's a well-developed, because that's the whole point of ontologies, specifically knowledge domain ontologies, right? Because if it's a well-developed ontology, and if you have a basic formal ontology underlaying that ontology, they should talk to each other. They should all talk.
Yeah.
They should they should link up seamlessly. So if you look at pharmaceutical research, biomedical research, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of ontologies, and they all interoperate. So you have the ontology of a particular disease, for example, diabetes. It links seamlessly with the ontology of blood tissue, yeah, and human physiology, etc., etc., etc. And that's the whole point of ontologies. If you're talking about domain ontologies, if we're talking about application ontologies, like the ones you use to develop systems, then it's a different story. But I think there is no contradiction in creating an ontology for distributed systems in the built environment and have our ontology, which is built on the top of the IFC or some other ontologies out there. So we've been collaborating with Anne-Marie Roxanne at Burgundy University. She's very good with ontologies, especially ontologies for the built environment. We started to draft a paper together a while ago, and I disappeared because I was finishing the other 2 books that I've been working on. But yeah, the paper is still hanging there. But she sent me a list of at least 200, I believe 200 ontologies for the built environment. And that's okay, because they should talk to each other. But what we need to think, it's when we, in my opinion, is that when we're describing those distributed systems, the tech is there, the tech is working. We've seen some tech demonstrations today and some startups, etc. And this is really great stuff. But we don't know what that tech it's solving in terms of business layer and business capabilities, business functions, and so forth. So I think that needs to be clarified. We need to bridge those 2 domains, and I think the DICO ontology is being developed for that. But I think
that's interesting.
Yeah. So because then we create that business value that we've been talking about. So we had some great presentations in this session, and I think there is a lot to be captured from what we're discussing here to inform business functions and talk about value streams modeling and how the technology is going to create that through useful applications. You know, and when we say application, we're talking about the information and data layers as well within the application layer. So I think that is a very cool thing to do, first of all, because we're going to really shed light on a blind spot we have at the moment, but it's also very valuable. There's a lot of money to be made out of that clarification, I think. So Ryan's presentation and Leo's presentation, I think it's super interesting, and also Matthew's presentation. So I have problems at work at the moment, as I mentioned before, like workforce management systems. And how do we check that, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 people on site are who they say they are, and that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing, and that they are not messing about, or they are not some spy from somewhere, you know, in a high security project. How do we do that? And how do we make sure that the data has not been messed up with? So I think that's a very important problem that the CBC should look into and try to solve, and leverage the network with people developing the technologies to get that technology and align with a project need through the understanding of a business function that is well clarified, well defined. Yeah, so I think the DICO ontology could be used for that, but could also be used in a kind of more fun way. So we can run our workshops, coding workshops, hackathons, etc., and see how we can kind of use this emerging kind of a development method that everybody is talking about. I don't know now, like, because you kind of mentor lots of startups, so you support them as well. So I'm very curious to see what is happening in that space.
It's exploding.
Yeah.
It changes every week, especially on the AI side, and in particular, was touched upon there, the relationship between knowledge graphs and AI and RAG and GraphRag and other approaches, and the 2 are finally finding a bit of a use for all of these knowledge graphs and knowledge bases, etc. Were sort of silos, but now AI is really starting to unlock some of the value there, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, and it speeds up development massively, actually, on all levels. The other, I mean, it brings another difficulty on what kind of architecture you need to use. You know, we're always one LinkedIn post and one archive paper earlier, right? So on, you know, what's the combination between vector databases and graph databases to do a proper RAG? But yeah, I think the vibe coding, you know, LLM agents for coding has kind of accelerated what kind of software development you can do. It's amazing, actually.
Yeah, you can get yourself into bad code a lot faster. So
Yes,
that's really good.
if you don't know what you're doing, yes, it's gonna I did an experiment one Sunday where I said, well, I'm gonna play with a demo and I'm gonna say yes to everything. So whatever the LLM said, I said, yeah, sounds great idea, right? And of course it didn't work. Like 4 hours later, it was awful. Yeah. So you really need to know what you're doing, and you need to plan ahead before you start developing with these kind of ideas. Hence why an ontology would really help
Yeah.
on anything.
Well, I think anybody who's worked with LLMs knows that the repeatability is a big issue for a lot of business use cases, and so
Yeah.
the knowledge graph and the combined with an ontology would certainly go a long way to help solve some of the repeatability issues, so that you get to the same answer.
That would be a question I would
Same
have for you
question.
guys. Are you using? I mean, you might not want to answer it, right? But are you using public providers of LLMs, or are you using your own, or is it a case of for every building depending on what the client wants in terms of the data, you set up ring-fast LLMs, and then the data doesn't get exposed to commercial providers?
Yeah, we have a couple different implementations. We can swap out whatever LLM, similar to Windsurf, like we would in Web5 coding or anything like that. You can swap out whatever LLM you want. We're also working with microdata center provider so that you could actually run your own LLMs in your own environment, in your own building, and keep it really secure and private. We have not developed our own, but it's something that we have considered. So the ontology discussion is definitely interesting for that.
Yep. It's interesting to us as well on that level, more so on when, developing AI that is custom to the problems of the built environment, because a lot of the diffusion models and the LLMs, they sound a little bit shoehorned into whatever problems we're trying to solve. So we can have a conversation on that as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, likewise, we use a combination of public or private models, and then in some cases have trained our own, but nothing specifically on construction.
Yeah.
But I think you need a combination of all of these things, and there's a move towards verifiable AI, trying to give some sort of cryptographic proof. Is this model actually the one that you think it is, etc.? We're a bit away from full ZKML. I spoke a bit about this last year, but it is an emerging space. But there's a lot of overhead that goes with it. But I think things will improve there. And attestations from trusted execution environments and decentralized AI are helping with that. But then opens up additional issues as well.